U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the Israel-Hamas war said, "Far too many Palestinians killed." Before we dive in details, please subscribe to the channel and stay always one step ahead to know all global important events happening around you. Give a thumbs up and share the video with your family and friends. Let's move on with the video. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Friday denounced the soaring number of Palestinians killed as Israel pushed ahead with its war against Hamas in Gaza, saying more needs to be done to protect the civilians. In his strongest comments to date on civilians bearing the brunt of the war, Blinken welcomed the 4-hour humanitarian Israeli pauses the White House announced on Thursday, but said further action was required to protect Gaza's civilians. Speaking to reporters in New Delhi as he wrapped up a 9-day trip to the Middle East and Asia, he said, "Far too many Palestinians have been killed, far too many have suffered these past weeks, and we want to do everything possible to prevent harm to them and to maximize the assistance that gets to them," he said, adding that Washington would be discussing further steps with Israel to advance these objectives. Israel has been pounding Gaza from the air and sea and on the ground since Hamas gunmen broke through the enclave's border fence on October 7th and carried out an attack in which Israel said 1,400 people were killed and about 240 abducted. Palestinian officials say more than 10,000 people have been killed in Gaza since Israel began its military campaign, and Gaza's hospitals are struggling to cope with medical supplies, clean water, and fuel to power generators running out. The White House said on Thursday that Israel agreed to pause military operations in parts of North Gaza for 4 hours a day, and the army said Palestinians on Friday were allowed to leave over 7 hours along a road south, but there was no sign of a let-up in the fighting that has laid waste to the seaside enclave. Blinken said the United States had concrete plans to get more humanitarian assistance in and steps to ensure more protection for the civilians, but achieving those objectives was a process. "This is a process, and it's not always flipping a light switch, but we have seen progress. We just need to see more of it," he said. Also, Blinken said that U.S. will defend itself swiftly and decisively against attacks by Iran or proxies. That message has been conveyed consistently to Iranian officials through other channels, Blinken said at a UN Security Council meeting Tuesday. The top U.S. diplomat's pointed public missive comes in the wake of an uptick in attacks by Iranian-backed proxies against U.S. interests in the Middle East. U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq and Syria have been attacked at least 13 times since October 17th, according to the Defense Department. Multiple U.S. officials told CNN that the U.S. has intelligence that such groups are planning to ramp up attacks against U.S. forces in the Middle East as Iran seeks to capitalize on the backlash in the region to U.S. support for Israel. In his remarks Tuesday, Blinken reiterated the U.S.'s full-throated support for Israel to defend itself and called on the international community to unequivocally condemn Hamas's barbaric terrorist attack against Israel. He stressed that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people, and Palestinian civilians are not to blame for the carnage committed by Hamas. Israel must take all possible precautions to avoid harm to civilians, Blinken said. However, rather than call for a ceasefire, Blinken instead said that humanitarian pauses must be considered to allow desperately needed aid to reach civilians in Gaza. There is growing international condemnation over the civilian death toll in Gaza and limited aid that has been allowed into the Strip. A limited number of aid trucks only began to access Gaza over the weekend, and aid agencies and doctors on the ground have warned that if fuel runs out, it will be catastrophic. I'm here today because the United States believes the United Nations, and this council in particular, has a crucial role to play in addressing this crisis, Blinken said Tuesday, noting that the U.S. had put forward a resolution that sets out practical steps that we can take together toward that end. A broader conflict would be devastating, not only for Palestinians and Israelis, but for people across the region and indeed around the world, the top U.S. diplomat said. To that end, we call on all member states to send a firm, united message to any state or non-state actor that is considering opening another front in this conflict against Israel or who may target Israel's partners, including the United States. Don't throw fuel on the fire, he said. He specifically called for countries to not only urge Iran to show restraint, but also make clear that if Iran or its proxies widen this conflict and put more civilians at risk, you will hold them accountable. Act as if the security and stability of the entire region and beyond is on the line. Because it is, he said. He said he would discuss preventing the conflict from spreading with his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, in Washington later this week. Blinken again urged countries to leverage their connections to press for the immediate release of hostages held by Hamas, saying that every member of this council, indeed, every member of this body should insist on that. 4 hostages, 2 Israelis and 2 Americans, have been released in recent days, but more than 200 hostages are believed to be trapped in Gaza. The top U.S. diplomat also said that the UN should redouble our collective efforts to build an enduring political solution to the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. The United States stands ready to work with anyone ready to forge a more peaceful and secure future for the region, the future its people yearn for and so deserve, he said. The power of words and the ripple effects that can ensue when those words are thrown into the global political arena. As we can see, the ripple effects of political commentary can reach far and wide, influencing not just the immediate conflict, but also the global discourse around it. Now that we've journeyed through the cascade of events following Blinken's comments, let's take a moment to reflect. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, amid rising tensions, endorsed Israel's right to defend itself against rocket attacks. His stance, however, sparked a variety of reactions globally, further stirring the pot of an already heated conflict. In the aftermath, we saw the delicate balancing act of diplomacy played out as Blinken visited Israel and the West Bank, striving to restore security coordination and urging restraint from extremist elements. The challenge of his mission was evident, particularly with the upcoming religious holidays and the simmering tensions they could potentially ignite. The fallout was not confined to the political arena. Companies like Web Summit felt the ripple effects, with CEO Paddy Cosgrave's remarks on the West's support for Israel leading to a significant backlash, demonstrating the fine line businesses tread in geopolitical debates. As we continue to watch the unfolding events in the Israel-Hamas war, it is a reminder of the complex interplay of politics, diplomacy, and conflict. Stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, your voice matters.